My name is Nell Lyhne. I have an artist name which is W K Lyhne, and I think maybe it causes confusion because I seem to have two names. One is a given childhood name which I use the initials of, and the Nell I appropriated when I was an adult, and I'm from London. So after a long career of being an architect, which I didn't decide to pursue after I had spent 7 years qualifying in it, because I had children and architecture is not family friendly. It's also full of strictures, and I moved into and not good with family life. So I moved into painting, and for some years I painted always on my own, and then I went to art school some 20 years after I had finished with architecture, and I went to art school almost reluctantly because I really didn't think they had that much to teach me, but and of course they didn't in some ways, the teaching was virtually non-existent, but I made the kind of statement that you are doing something, that you're investing in, this is your practice and that this is what you're doing, felt important, or looking back on it feels important. At the time it didn't, but I can see now that part of the reason to go to art school is that you are claiming that this is your future. And it was particularly interesting for me to do that in my 40s because it felt even more purposeful, more chosen. And almost immediately after that, I started on a PhD. A PhD is contribution to knowledge. And of course, as artists, you are doing that. But there's this kind of confidence about stating it explicitly is perhaps not a human thing, and certainly not a female thing. This is what I'm offering, this is what I bring to the table. So I'm finding, particularly in the writing up, that's a useful declamation. I think declamation is the right word, or declamatory. Anyway, I'm interested in the animals that have been reified in the my culture. I'm not Christian at all, but I mean, in the established Western Christian tradition, I'm interested in the animals. There are two of them in my respect that have been reified as being standing in for Christ. One is the flayed ox, which has been painted through, Rembrandt, Soutine and others have painted this as a kind of cruciform thing to show that it's Christ on the cross. And the other one is the lamb. So I started my research by looking at this animal. It's the animal in us that dies. It's the animal in us that becomes angry. And I think if we can acknowledge that we're all animals, actually we're first animals. It's the animal that caught COVID. That all those things, we're first animals. We might be the top of the food chain apparently, but we are first animals. I think it would take away some of the pretension, some of the layering. That's my interest in this. It's kind of the honesty that you operate more often than you care to admit with your animal self. It dawned on me very quickly that a real modern sheep is nothing to do with the lamb of God. And the real modern sheep is a female. And the real modern sheep is a ewe that is bred to breed. And through my researches, I've traced the history of the incomparable wealth that wool provided through female generative labour, i.e. when you look into field of sheep, they're not family groups. I mean, the poor man gets taken off and slaughtered. They are females having young. That is how agriculture, husbandry works. But in terms of sheep, what wool provided was just incomparable in terms of wealth. It's unnoticed pretty much in terms of, I think it might be, it's certainly documented. My PhD makes up a lot of those documents, but the actual cultural difference that money made to Western culture is almost immeasurable. So for 1500 years since the Romans, wool provided the money for everything. It's not that just wool made things you wore and wool built things you wore. Of course it did, but it was also the trade and taxation around that. It was the whole system of commerce that money provided the money for every last thing in the world, and that money provided so much money that it produced a culture that could move to globalization, that could build ships to go and plunder new worlds, but also provided the money from universities. So the whole Enlightenment emerged from this money tradition. I think, again, coming back to Woolf, money matters. It really comes. The reason why she says you need a room of your own of 500 a year is because money dignifies, being paid for something dignifies what would be otherwise considered frivolous if it wasn't paid for. It's the glamour of saying, I'm going to choose otherwise. I'm also really interested in the animal that is the you, in the sense that the modern you goes through a certain process. She's remotely impregnated. By that she can, she's literally remotely impregnated, or she could be tupped. They're called tupping. By one ram will tup 600 ewes in 2 days or something. So it's as good as remotely impregnated. The only subject of love in her life is with her child, which she loses relentlessly. She is linked as through the lamb as a kind of symbol of atonement. Jesus, the sacrifice, being the ultimate sacrifice, and so on. And these experiences are exactly the same as the Virgin Mary. So she is the animal counterpart to the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary is also remotely impregnated. The only subject of intimacy is her life with her child, which she loses. But in the case, and she's also a figure of atonement in the sense that Mary was posited as the second Eve, the non-transgressive Eve, because Eve was transgressive and led Adam into sin. So I make this connection between the two of them. The one is the animal counterpart so she's the material, the embodied counterpart to the silent cipher of Mary. But they're both as mothers. One provided all the money, one provided all the spiritual location. The you has become my, I guess it's like my maman, my Louise Bourgeois maman, which is kind of frightening and also a repairer. So that's my feminine with a capital F. That's my eternal feminine, in the sense that she does all this and did all this and is actually unnoticed. I'm not sure when I first heard the word feminism, the word feminist or feminism. I can't recall such a time, which in itself is useful. I think that I probably heard it within the context of something derogatory. There's a line in Virginia Woolf from A Room of One's Own, which I know almost verbatim, where some Edwardian man is saying that a woman makes some comment about men being lazy or something in this comment, and the man says, "The arrant feminist." And Woolf says she may or may not be making an accurate comment about whether the writer is lazy, but why does that make her a feminist? And I think I had the sensation that if you located a source of your difference, I'm going to start with difference. I'm writing about irrigare, so difference is important. But if you located the source of your difference and potential lack of advantage, historically that went with, that put you under the label of being feminist and therefore was problematic. I think that's probably where I first heard the word feminist. It was connected with being difficult, problematic, irritating, and so on. I think using the word patriarchy amongst men who are already acting like feminists can sometimes feel difficult. I can understand that. My father worked in the Emerald City. He worked in the big, glamorous city. My father was very glamorous. He was a very glamorous-looking man who was not only glamorous-looking, but he also was the one who had the money, he had the agency, he had the leaving the home thing. And my wonderful mother, who could not have been lovelier and kinder, was, urged us to respect that. And I think that's probably was fair in her way. So when he came back from the Emerald City, which was most of the time. You noticed it. It was important. And then I guess, so I went through a process of relationships and things like that, which reflected this. But I think in some respects, like Oz, you can see that it's just a man behind a curtain who's kind of got a smoke machine and other nonsense like that. It's so threaded through our consciousness everywhere, even my own consciousness. And some of that I quite like, actually. I don't mind some of the overarching power of it. To me, I think my feminism is emerging as an artist and as now as a writer by doing this PhD. But I think my feminism is returning to it's not an either or. It's not patriarchy or the embodied feminine and female experience. It's and it's one, and they do different things. Perhaps patriarchy is the long history of things that have enabled the sexed person, in this case the male person, to use his physical strength to dominate in every other respect. So I think at the most basic level, you've got two gendered people, a man and a woman, and you've got one physically stronger than the other. They have different capacities, and as I said, it's an and. But at some level, that domination of one over the other, I can oblige you to do something because I'm literally stronger than you, is then enacted and reified through structures. It gets deepened and deepened and deepened to be moved beyond a simple process of reification, but to a culture, a really interesting and valuable culture, which then produces writers and thinkers and so on. So I think that is the patriarchy. If there starts from that, for me, it comes from I'm more able physically than you are. In terms of that, I can dominate you. Yes, you can bring life into the world, but that's not what we're discussing. I can literally dominate you. And then through that domination, it gets involved in structures which then inform every part of what we do. A woman in Western Europe couldn't keep the money she earned until I think it was 1890 in Britain. So what must be the point of trying to not only have X number of children, because there was no contraception and you did largely probably what your husband told you to do, and that was your job even, and it was in terms of reproducing the next generation as important a job. It went from the richest to the poorest. That was your job. The Queen still had to produce children. So, but what would be the point in investing yourself in trying to earn money if you couldn't keep it? Any money you earned went to somebody else. Again, I'm going to quote from Woolf, where she says, two women are having a conversation. One says to the other concerning some important date in the government at the time. Do you remember what happened on August the 17th or something? And the older one says to the younger one, no, I can't remember. And that's because she wasn't part of that conversation, because all the dishes were washed and all the children had got out into the world. And that loss is in a patriarchal system for women is increasingly becoming more apparent to me, that you have to participate a little bit more in that, in offerings beyond just safely and with love and kindness bringing forth the next generation. It's not enough. Lately I've been working on imagery from canonical imagery and applying this eternal feminine of the sheep onto other imagery. This is my interest now. I'm very interested in canonical sculpture. I'm very interested in the successfulness of it, mainly the successfulness of it. They're incredibly exciting. You look at canonical sculptures, you look at men striding and holding things up, and the size of them, scale of them, they are very successful. Patriarchal aesthetics are very successful. And I like that, but I want to engage with part of that. I want to use that. So this is an and. I don't want to ignore it. I want to bring it into what I'm doing. That's what I'm working on.